This episode of Grilled is sponsored by Rationale, your leading provider in multifunctional hot food preparation equipment. Register now for a free Rationale live demo at www.rationale-online.com.
The Staff Canteen now has its own shop, so you can get your hands on as much merch as you want. From mugs, t-shirts to these hoodies, which you'll see myself and any of the guests on our podcast wearing throughout. Go and take a look. The link is below, and please do give us a thumbs up if you do decide to purchase anything. Finally, we are giving away one hoodie per episode for the next 6 episodes. You can find out how to win at the end of this podcast.
Thank you for listening to Grilled, the Staff Canteen podcast. Cara has asked me to let everybody know that these podcasts may contain some swearing, some explicit language, and some topics not for the faint-hearted. No offence is intended, and please listen at your own discretion.
Welcome to Grilled.
I want to eat under roast whenever I want to eat under roast, not when you want me to eat it.
I just remember Brad's smell of his beard. You just had a biggest, fluffiest beard, and I was like, God, he smells so good. I don't know why, it's weird. Sometimes you put smell or something to it, and I just remember that. Well, it's a bit bizarre.
Why are you in your chef's white cellar? Are you working?
I'm cooking burgers.
Oh, burgers! I hope they're not McDonald's.
And I just lash it all over the hot toast as it melts and quickly munch it up, crunchy, crunchy, munchy.
Dying to get like a piece of your culinary penis in or around their mouth.
Welcome to Grilled, a podcast by the Staff Canteen. I'm Cara, editor of the Staff Canteen, and this is the penultimate episode in this series of 6 with Alex Claridge. And before we get into that, if you've missed any so far, they are all available to listen to, and as well as those, there are other episodes in this series. Alex, you've moved house since we last spoke, and I've seen your new kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very nice kitchen, other than the fact that every single surface is luminescent orange, which I'm currently torn between taking every cabinet door off or putting over all of the doors as if I was back in my 14-year-old bedroom where I'd collect band stickers and affix it to everything I could. So, yeah, you know, I've moved some boxes from one location to another. One day I hope to unpack them and make it a home. But yeah, hence the change of setting, because I also have a dodgy internet there until it's properly connected.
And I was excited about you being sat in the orange kitchen as well. We'll have to save that for another time.
Yeah, save that for the finale.
Okay, amazing. Right, please introduce your guest today.
So our guest today is Eddie Shepard. I have known Eddie in some capacity for quite a long time. So Eddie and I met up to talk food not quite a decade, but not far off ago when I was working in Manchester. And, you know, over the years, sort of, we've checked in, I mean, pretty sporadically. It'll kind of be a once in a, are you still alive, are you okay kind of conversation. But I've always watched from afar, and, you know, Eddie has never been anything but interesting. He's the author of lots of cookbooks, which he just self-published way before, you know, that was a thing in the industry. Eddie just, you know, kept putting out these cookbooks with, you know, seriously, you know, intricate, modernist, exciting, different cooking. You know, we have one of his books on modernist cocktails in our kind of bar. You know, we printed it all out and made a sort of, you know, a laminate copy, laminated for your enjoyment. And, you know, he's done all sorts of things. He's been a development chef. And I suppose I envy Eddie because, you know, in this restaurant, me and, you know, Luby, operations manager, we've always joked about having an 8-cover restaurant, about just doing a restaurant unapologetically, you know, however we want. But, you know, Eddie has a kind of a, you know, a restaurant concept. I'm not even sure that Eddie calls it a restaurant, called the Walled Garden, which I believe is in his home, surrounded by, you know, his own beehive. He makes his own knives. You know, behind him, he's got a rotavat. He makes his own spirits. Like, this is someone who's kind of been like, yes, I'm a chef, but I'm going to do it exactly how I want and totally different. So I just wanted to really share my envy and understand a little bit how that journey's come about.
Brilliant.
Eddie Shepard, welcome to Grills.
Hi, that's such a lovely intro. It makes me want my career. I know all the little difficulties it comes with.
You've done it, mate. You've done it.
Shall I do our icebreakers and then we'll go into...
Yeah, that's fine. Let's do some icebreakers.
Just makes my life easier when I'm editing, that's all. I know you're just trying to avoid them, Alex, but they're going to happen, so... Right, Eddie, it's really simple. All I need from you is a number between 1 and 6, and then I will ask you the question associated with the number. Just say whatever pops into your head. Don't overthink it, as Alex often does. And it's
There's not
just
some
a bit
system I should decode and.
Yeah. So any number between 1 and 6.
Cool. I'll go for 3, please.
Have you ever cried while watching a film, and what was it?
Oh yeah, like I think if you've seen any Pixar films, then you'd be inhuman if you hadn't. So like, yeah, absolutely. I think the last one we watched was maybe Soul. Like, yeah, anything like that is. Yeah, I'm not a I'm not a sort of stoic character in that way.
Okay. Alex, what about you? Have you ever cried at a film?
I've cried at a few films, yeah. The last year a lot more. I don't know if there's residual sort of like COVID stress, but I cried at Matilda, I cried at Brave, I cried at a film called Home, I cry at Up, I cry when I open a packet of biscuits. An emotional year, yeah.
Okay. Right, give me a number between 1 and 6.
6, please.
Would you rather be smart or sexy?
Oh, good question. Can't really ask someone who's already got both, can you? That's cruel. Oh, smart every time. Like, you know, sexy is just a phase. You know, smart stays. Like,
Yeah.
being the I do. By the time I'm 40, I'm going to like Gandalf's sister. So I'm pretty much, you know, that's going to happen. I'd rather be smart and use that to trick people into thinking I'm sexy.
Eddie, give me a number between 1 and 6.
2.
Have you ever been arrested?
No. You know, I'm pretty well behaved. Like,
Alex?
I've had a couple of near misses with breach of the peace. And I once pretended to be a police officer on a train, which almost got me arrested. But other than that, I'm good.
Why?
A fight broke out. I wanted to stop it. And I thought that announcing I was an undercover police officer would help. But the guy behind me was an undercover police officer. You can understand the situation.
Excellent.
But he was dead nice. He was sort of like, look, you can't really impersonate the police. That is a crime. I understand you were trying to do a good thing. And we moved on with our lives.
Okay. I think that's one of my favourite have you ever been arrested answers, actually. I like that one.
Just like Eddie, I'm actually quite well behaved.
Right. Give me a number between 1 and 6.
There's me. Okay, cool.
Yes, you 1, 4, or a 1.
Yeah.
What is your favourite smell?
This is easy. So there's a parfumier called Frederic Malle. There's a perfume called Notorious Oud, which is just like very sort of very intense. You've kind of got that kind of wood, sandalwood, kind of cedar, a little bit of smoke, a little bit of kind of tobacco vanilla on it. Like it's class. Like it's class, and it's a lot healthier than actually just smoking and drinking to get that fragrance.
That you knew that answer, didn't you? There was no messing there.
I love smells. I like smells.
Eddie,
we
have 4 or 5.
5, please.
Which app on your phone do you use the most?
I kind of do everything off my phone more or less now. So like realistically, it's probably timers, like setting. Oh, and I've got like some crazy note taking and organizational software which like organizes my entire life. So yeah, actually maybe that's an app called Things, and everything that I need to do is in there and set to repeat and mise en place lists and anything I'm supposed to be doing any day. So yeah, I would really struggle if that suddenly vanished off my phone.
I've never heard of that. I'm gonna have to go and have a look at that. Things.
I'm downloading that. I love a good list.
And a final question. Alex, what is the strangest Amazon purchase you've made or nearly made?
I can't answer that.
Well, you definitely can now.
10 out of 10. I'm going to decline to comment what that is.
I'll edit it out. It's fine. You can just tell us.
No, I still don't think I can say it. I mean, but bear in mind that I'm sat in my restaurant with the entire team here, and some of them know exactly what it was after accidentally getting it sent to the restaurant a few years ago. But books, sundries, sellotape. I don't know. I've never ordered anything peculiar on Amazon at all.
Oh, you're such a liar. I'm intrigued now. I didn't expect that reaction.
Yeah, discomfort. Good discomfort there.
Right, okay, well I will leave you. I won't keep pushing. So right. Let's talk about Eddie.
Let's. That feels safer. I mean, firstly, like, how's it been coming back from COVID? Like, how's the restaurant going? Do you even call it a restaurant? Is there a new language system you've kind of created for it?
I tend to call it. I call it an underground restaurant because I think it's important for guests to know that it is slightly different to a restaurant. Like, there's no, I'm not licensed, so it's bring your own alcohol and things. So they have to understand that there is like a slight difference there, but equally it's a long way from being like a more casual concept like people doing supper clubs and stuff. It's formalized. It's set open days and hours, and food hygiene inspected and insured, and I've got my licenses still here and stuff. So it's sort of, yeah, I think underground restaurant sums it up for me. It's like just a little off kilter from a normal restaurant. And yeah, it's been like largely great coming back, just being back open, like 6 months closed and then opening back up. I was just so excited to be cooking again, and the guests have been like awesome, so patient, like moving. I had 6 months worth of bookings, which I'm still sort of cooking my way through currently, and 99% of people held onto their booking, just wanted to move it. And then when people have been coming out, I think I pretty consistently get really nice guests anyway, but people have seemed like thrilled to be out again, really excited to be having their meal. Some of them, because I've got quite a long lead time on bookings as well. I've had guests that booked in 2019 that are coming and eating now. So it's kind of amazing that they've been like patient enough to stick with it right through till here. And I think like everyone in the industry, like I'm knackered, and we've all been through the mill in the last, year and a half, but it's been such a positive experience, like this last couple of months, that like I'm clinging to the positivity of that, really.
I think you have to. I think, and I think everyone we've had on so far has been very much, it's been hard, it's taken its toll, but there's a light there somewhere. So, I mean, I know in various versions, like you've had this underground restaurant concept for kind of quite a long time. Like, what was the origin? Like, was there ever an option where you looked at having a more traditional, like, restaurant setup? How did you end up forging such a unique path, I suppose? Because a lot of people talk it, but to just go out there and do it and make it work, like, I think a lot of conversations now need to be around the idea that there's not one singular way to be successful in being a chef or restaurants. And I think probably COVID's accelerated chefs thinking like that. But, you know, you did this before COVID, man. Like, you can't blame this madness on COVID. You made these justify.
Well, again, you know, I think it's sort of it sounds more thought through, and I could like retroactively sort of edit like how I ended up here a bit. But really what happened was, I mean, so I've been doing plant-based food for like a long time, like maybe like it might be coming up on something like 17 years now that I've been a chef, and I was plant-based all the way through. And like certainly that sort of time, like 15 years ago, like people weren't clambering for like a plant-based chef, and certainly not one that wanted to do something, you know, there were vegetarian or vegan restaurants around that time, but like not, you know, very old fashioned, not particularly exciting food. So all the way through really my whole career, there's been this point of like, if I want to do the next thing that I want to do, if I want to move on to that next stage and explore something new and keep moving the food forward, I just didn't have some of the options that you might have more traditionally. Like, you know, I got to that stage where in terms of learning stuff in restaurants, you start to look around and go, where's the next restaurant I go to learn to get to the next level? And with plant-based food, you reach that point relatively quickly where there aren't a lot of options for someone else to go to. So early on-ish in my career, I sort of realized I was going to have to be, if I wanted to learn new stuff, that was going to have to be self-generated to a large extent. I was going to have to put time into trying stuff myself, and that led to doing things like the books and things like that. And when I started doing the underground restaurant, was I'd got to that point where I was at a stage in my career where I was trying to make the decision of like, do I open a restaurant? Do I look at other things within the culinary world? Do I think about going in a different route? And I thought, well, I will try doing something fairly casual. I want to still be cooking for people, even if it was just to generate. At the time, I was thinking, you know, maybe I'll do a next book and I'll cook through these ideas, have people come in and eat them. And then, like, I got about 6 months into doing that, and I was like, oh, this is exactly like what I should be doing. It's all the stuff that I love about food, and most of the stuff that I loved about restaurants. You know, you really miss that sense of cooking with a team, like that I really miss. But everything else is, you know, so I'm doing a tasting menu, 12 courses. The only thing that I have to consider with food is like, what do I want that menu to look like? And you can be just very, very focused on the food, and then cooking and serving for the guests as well. I found quite quickly that like I really got back to tons of what I loved about food, because the kitchen here is open and I'm bringing the food out to the guests and explaining it to them. So you are very, very directly cooking for people in a way that you don't always necessarily feel like in a restaurant if you're sending food out and you don't interact with the guests. And that both kind of took me back to what I really first loved about cooking, and maybe also sort of slightly, like, I think it's been good for my cooking in that if you're going to make this food and then put it down in front of the guests and explain to them what you've done, like, you have to be so 100% behind the food that you're putting down in front of them. And there can't be any real sense of, you know, there can't be really artifice or ego and stuff involved there, because you're going to watch them eat that food. So if you've done something, you know, there might have been a point in the past where I'd have been like, oh, I've done this, it's really, really clever. Like, you know, you need to understand how clever this is. Perhaps it's not as delicious as it could be, but it's clever. Like, you cannot do stuff like that. It keeps you really, really focused on being like, this has to be delicious. I'm going to watch people eat it and be there for their reaction. It's got to be like, it's 100% focused on that.
You said you've always been plant-based from the very beginning. So what's your story pre-chef to get you know, because you said that's what you've always wanted to do?
Yeah, so I came in a slightly unusual route. I was doing a philosophy degree, and while I was doing my degree, I started working in kitchens to pay my way, you know, through being a student. And by the end of that degree, I didn't ever want to read anything heavy going again, and was pretty sick of that world. And I'd really kind of fallen in love with kitchens. But starting out as a student, I was vegetarian, and no one in kitchens was really bothered about that when you're like, you know, you're the part-time student helping them out in the. So when I sort of first moved into restaurants, I was still like, that beginning of my career sort of overlapped with that period of it being a sort of you know, a side student job. And yeah, so it wouldn't have been something you'd have planned out like this again, especially at that period of time. And I was in Scotland as well, as you can imagine. Like in some of the restaurants in Glasgow, it was like yeah, not everyone got the idea of being vegetarian, but amazing. I found even at that point in time though, what was always most important to chefs and the restaurants that I was working in was like, can you do the shift? Can you keep up with the pace? Can you like, so I would sometimes early on get a bit of a ribbing when they're like, oh, it's the, you know, it's the veggie kid, and like you get like a light ribbing like you do in all kitchens, but people would very quickly judge you on like, are you keeping up with pace in service? Are you getting all your mise en place done? You know, if you're doing all that stuff, like my experience with chefs ultimately didn't really like, that's what was important to people, like, you know.
Yeah. And what was the choice to be vegetarian in the first place? Is it just taste, or is it because of animal welfare? Like where does that come from?
Yeah, so it wasn't like a big thought out decision really, because like I say, I was a student, and at the time, like being a poor student, I remember there being a point where I was like the meat and stuff that I could afford was, you know, terrible, like it just like awful, both in terms of quality and welfare and stuff. And then you look at it and you're like, man, I really shouldn't be like, I don't think I should be eating this stuff. And I didn't really have a set of concrete ideas about ethics, but I knew I didn't want to be eating that stuff. I didn't feel good about where it came from. And I, at the time, just basically financially didn't have a particularly another option. And so I thought I would try being vegetarian at the time. It just sort of stuck and worked well for me. It actually got me more into cooking, because then I was having to think a bit more, you know, again, as a student, just about what I was going to eat. So I was cooking more from scratch. And at the same time, I was learning new stuff in the kitchen. So I would want to come home and practice and try different things and see if I could make a veggie, you know, option. And so I've never had this, like, I don't think I think people should eat basically whatever they want to eat. I don't try and persuade anyone to be plant-based or vegetarian or whatever. I think largely it's kind of quite naturally happening that there's a movement more towards people being more conscious of where meat and stuff comes from, and being kind of overall maybe reducing the amount in their diet. But like beyond that, I don't think, you know, I'm not evangelical. I don't think the answer is like, oh, everyone should completely change, you know, everyone should be vegan or something. That's not my
I'm intrigued with the guests you have coming to interview. Are they all vegetarian, or actually do you find that you have a real eclectic mix?
Yeah, I find now they're almost exclusively not vegetarian and vegan. Like it's more rare to have anyone vegetarian or vegan come. It's largely people that are just into food and eating out, and you know, part of that's the price point. It's £75 a head for the tasting menu, and so I guess, you know, depends on your view on costs and food and stuff, but that probably puts you into the category of being like, it's more people that are into eating out that are looking at that kind of range of like restaurant sort of prices, which also really suits me. Like I think largely people come, the plant-based thing is sort of almost fallen by the wayside a bit. Like it is all plant-based, but it's not particularly, you know, I feel I have to tell people that in case they come expecting something that it isn't. but beyond that, I don't try and push that as a reason for people to come. Like it should be not too noticeable, really, ideally.
I mean, I think it's super interesting anyway, because you're right. Like, you know, I mean, when I was thinking about who I'd love to have a catch up with for this, I don't actually like, in my head, I'm not like, oh, you know, Eddie, oh, the vegetarian. Like, I don't, you know, I don't actually consider it. I don't really think it's consideration. I think, you know, all of us are mindful of, you know, the potential, perhaps overlooked, I think, in restaurants. You know, I think some of the best dishes we've had on over the last couple of years, like Marius, who sat behind me listening to every word, like, you know, some of his best cooking is like vegetarian dishes, you know. He's pulling a face and saying he doesn't like vegetables, but you know, it is. But I suppose, you know, now you've kind of settled into it, like, here's the $1 million question. You know, you've proven that you can make restaurants work, and they, you know, restaurants, you can take the step back and go, what is a restaurant? A restaurant is a space which brings people together and brings them kind of, you know, enjoyment through food, right? Which is actually a lot more open-ended than I think what we traditionally look at. Now you've done it this way, you know, if Cara turned around now and said, look, Staff Canteen would like to give you $250,000 to open a bricks and mortar traditional restaurant, would you do it? Would you ever go back?
The thing, like, I would never say never, but I struggle to imagine at the minute what would persuade me to open a more, like a more traditionally structured restaurant, because at the moment I feel like I get everything that I need really out of this. I get all the creative freedom I could want. I'm fully booked until 2022. Like, so I'm, you know, I don't have to worry about bookings. I'm in my own space. So I mean, there's upsides and downsides to this, but you can literally get up and start in the kitchen and work until you like go to sleep, which you know, it's not always what I do. And that wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't be healthy to always work like that, but you can. And a big upside of that is that if you're feeling, you know, if you're creatively interested in something, like any time of the day, I can be like, oh, I'm going to try that. I'm going to set the rate about running. I'm going to do something, or, and little things like having, so we've got the 2 beehives in our garden here, and a nice big wood burning oven, and just having, like, you know, I love cooking. It's why I wanted to get into it, and doing what I do this way, I really am immersed in it and living in it at all times, which again, I get my, like, 99% of the time, I really love that it is genuinely a sort of, again, like, take the bees, for example. There's, you know, there is work involved in looking after the bees, and then I get to use their honey on my menu, but it doesn't feel like restaurant work, you know, opening up the hives and looking at the bees, or taking honey from them, or I've got raised beds out the front for herbs and things like that, and all of that feels like really enjoyable time. So, you know, of course, there's the stress, and like there's long hours and prep and all the stuff that you associate with, like, you know, professional cooking, but there's so much other stuff that I get so much enjoyment out of that I think I kind of can't imagine how I would now translate that into a bricks and mortar place, and I don't know what advantages I would necessarily get, other than, yeah, when I've thought about it, I think it would largely come down to my ego if I wanted to do that, because it would be easier to be considered amongst, like, it would be easier to communicate what you are with a normal bricks and mortar restaurant and like set out the stall. But that would be really for,
yeah,
I don't think I'd be any happier with it, you know.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I think egos, you know, I reflect on any decision that I've taken with ego in mind. It's never as gratifying as that little voice in your head tells you it's going to be. It doesn't actually make you feel any better long term. And, you know, one of the things that I think You know, like not in a weird like fanboy kind of way, but like, you know, I just thought it was mega, and I was sort of like, this is, you know, I remember like, you know, when you first putting out the cookbooks, and you know, I love experimenting like with, you know, recipes and techniques, and I remember when they came out thinking like, some of these are like significantly more useful and applicable than, you know, should we say, some of the kind of bestseller list Bloomsbury you know, coffee table books. And then like over the last couple of years, you know, I know you've done some stuff with Mark over at Fresh, who is, you know, I think pretty universally acknowledged as, you know, Mark's a massive talent. You know, he's got one of those awards from the tire company as well, so he's doing well.
yeah.
And you know, more recently, you've got to do an event with Where the Light Gets In, and I just think it's a testimony to perhaps how much more food's becoming a bit more outward looking. That, you know, these are both really high profile restaurants, and for them to kind of recognize and want to collaborate, you know, when you talk about needing bricks and mortar to, I guess, feel part of the pack, you know, that's kind of the pressure, isn't it? That's what's the pressure I feel like, you know. It's a little bit like, have you seen my building? It's nice and shiny. Oh, I've got a shiny building. Like, you know, that's the dialogue. But actually, you know, you look at the guys who want to collaborate and you go, this is one awesome for like the belief that food and creativity goes way beyond all these arbitrary dietary delineations.
Yeah, they were. Do you know what? They were. I really enjoyed both those collaborations, Mark at Fresh and Where the Light Gets In. And both are, you know, people that I had existing relationships with. Like Mark, I've been friends with for a long time. He quite early on in my career sort of got in touch and we started chatting. And you know, he's just, I mean, he is an incredible chef. Actually, I owe an awful lot to Mark as well in terms of, you know, if people don't know about Fresh in the Wirral, it's a Michelin-starred restaurant with just Mark in the kitchen and just doing 8 covers a night. I think maybe, yes, I think it's about 8 that he's doing at the moment. And he does have front of house staff, but that was the first, that was critical in me doing what I'm doing now, in that I went, you know, maybe 10 years ago or something, went for a meal there. And it was just utterly incredible, like still completely stand out in my memory, like stuff that I still can't figure out how he did, and just was like, yeah, it was insane. And at one point the bread course came out and he'd done like, there was like 4 different breads or something on the bread course in the middle of this like 14 course menu, and this is one dude in the kitchen. You know, I remember just thinking, like, what sort of madness is that, right? Like who looks at their workload and goes, yeah, better do 4 different breads, as it's just me doing all this like. And it just totally blew me away. But also the fact that he was doing that on his own just planted the seed, I guess, of that idea of like, okay, there isn't just one way to do a restaurant. You know, you can do something different. You can and yeah, so that had a huge influence on me. And he like really kindly got in touch, like, well, we chat a lot, but about 2 years ago he said, do you want to come and do a weekend at Fresh? So we did a weekend cooking together there, which again was great. That's really nice to have that like lovely experience cooking with Mark and seeing how he works, because he is, you know, a culinary genius. And also just really nice to be asked and to have someone feel like you will fit into their, like, you know, even at that high level, you know, he's not worried that I'm going to come and lose him his star, you know, like that kind of thing at least. So
that'd be such an iconic takeover. Like, I was takeover. Yeah, I did a takeover for 2 days. He's lost his star. I imagine.
Yeah. that was great. And again, Sam from Where the Light Gets In Stockport. So I grew up in Stockport. Me and Sam have known each other like since we were teenagers, again, sort of on and off, but we actually we worked in a really crappy off license together when we were about 17 or something. And then as you do, you go off on your own different routes in life and stuff. But a few years ago, before he opened Where the Light Gets In, we sort of started bumping into each other again, through food stuff. And Sam's just utterly lovely, and the restaurant that he's built there is, again, incredible. And in Stockport, which is not somewhere growing up you would have thought you could have this kind of really ambitious, really different restaurant that he's created. And the way the whole team works there, like the way that they're sourcing and growing ingredients. They've got a garden on top of this old shopping center in Stockport, which is nuts. And it's incredibly inspiring what he's doing there. And again, I take it as a real compliment that he wanted me to come and cook with them, and hopefully it works kind of mutually, that I definitely know that I pick things up from doing this sort of thing. It's great to see how other people work, and and hopefully there's some vice versa there, they see some of the different things that I'm doing, and hopefully there's something useful or interesting in that too.
I mean, particularly Where the Light Gets In, I just, the produce, man, all the little pictures you guys are putting up of absolute, chef's kiss, I believe is the expression. I think, you can see the similarities in the kind of delineation, and I don't know, I don't know whether actually it is partly a kind of a northern city thing though, because I kind of feel you've got this belt of really creative, but really sort of, I suppose free cooking, kind of stretching. Manchester, the couple of years I spent cooking there, Manchester, and I mean, it's nothing but love, fucking wild. Some of the weirdest services in my life took place in Manchester. But there also seems to be this kind of free thinking. I think it's that willingness to just be like, we're going to create what we want, do it how we want it, and kind of focus on that, which I don't know. I'm sure every city will be like, no, my food seems better than yours. Appreciate it. It has that narrative, but I really feel like in Manchester, there is this kind of emerging, set of individuals, yourself included, who are kind of, I'm not really a chef, I'm a grower, I'm kind of, I'm a chef, I'm kind of, I'm an artist, that willingness to kind of transcend boundaries. I kind of wanted to talk about the tour you've got behind you.
The Rotovap.
I think you were a really, really positive influence on the way I think about things. I've always been very interested in cocktails in restaurant settings and how that punctuates the meal. And, our kind of, our head of drinks here, a guy called Rob Woods, he's amazing. And I genuinely think that there's just as much culinary work and benefit to what we do with our drinks program. But back when I was forming my ideas, it was actually, it was seeing that you were doing the same stuff that made me think, oh man, I'm not crazy, or if I am, at least there's another guy who is too. So how's that all kind of fit together? Because that's pretty mega. Investing in a Rotovap, that's not a kind of I'll nip down Argos and pick up one of them Rotovaps, is it? That's a commitment to that as a program of development and research. How does this fit into kind of your creative process and your kind of views on food?
Well, so I guess, with the Rotovap specifically, it was, I guess there's two sides to it. So I'm in no sense an expert on drinks and cocktails, and I don't come from that world, but I was very interested in distilling, and very interested sort of for two big reasons in distilling and how, and particularly low temperature vacuum distilling, as a way of freezing flavors in time. I can't think of many other things where you can take a flavor and you can preserve it in the way that you can with something like vacuum distillation, which opens up a ton of really interesting possibilities in terms of flavors and food, but also is, for me, working on my own in the kitchen, there's also a workflow advantage to some of those things. If I can have say if something's in season once a year, but I can say, right, I'm going to spend 2 days like just processing this one ingredient, and I'm going to make a batch of something that I can freeze that flavor in time and use it throughout the whole rest of the year. That like hopefully then gives me something interesting and creative to work with, but also gives me something like, it means that I'm not having to like every day fire up the rotovap, and you know, it's like it's more something that I use intermittently throughout the month and do things in sort of little segments. So yeah, I found that really fascinating. And one thing that I have done through pretty much all of my career is like, at any point anything's been going well, I've sort of used it as an opportunity to reinvest either the time or the money into what I'm doing. And a couple of years ago, I got asked to come out and do menus for the Four Seasons in Cyprus. So I did them a vegetarian and vegan menu, and did some other consulting work for them and stuff. And then was like, right, well, I'm gonna reinvest everything from that into getting the rotovap and getting set up and working with that. And now it's quite a big part of how is it a bit like it? I use it across a few dishes, and I think it particularly suits my style of food in that, like, I really like to, if I can, aim for fairly minimal plates, and just having like 2-3 flavors if I can, but having the intensity and the balance and stuff be as close to perfect as I can. And the rotovap will allow you to, can help you along with that, with some of the things like low temperature reductions. You know, if you take a fresh ingredient or you know, so I have blood orange on the menu at the moment, where I took fresh blood oranges and reduced them in the rotovap, and because it's under a vacuum, you can make this reduction at room temperature, so you never heat that fresh blood orange juice up above room temperature, but you can concentrate it to the point that it's like much more intense, but keeps all that like fresh vibrancy of citrus, and is shelf stable. So suddenly then I've got this thing that's like incredibly vibrant, fresh, citrusy, but also I can, like, I just have it on hand to use on a dish. So the current dish I use that on is a really, really simple dish, which is like little fried cubes of potato terrine, and they're topped with this smoked olive oil and pecorino emulsion. And then people get this blood orange reduction to drizzle over it. And it's just like one mouthful, but you get this burst of like intensity of flavor. And that's quite often how I'm trying to look at food. And so, you know, things like the rotovap are great tools to get you there. And then equally, like some, you know, super traditional stuff like, you know, the beehives, or I've still got a little copper still as well, and things like that are like, whatever helps get you to interesting, delicious flavors. Pretty much I'm up for having a bash with anything, pretty much.
That last sort of 4 minutes is exactly why I love what you do, to be honest. Just yeah, you know, it's a joy to hear someone after the last 12 months still so earnestly passionate about what they do and so logically minded with it. And I think it's yeah.
Oh, cheers, man.
I'm just jealous. Like we're opening a bar around the corner from the restaurant in November, and like that's the perfect candidate for me to be able to like finally justify some of the kind of, you know, we've got a spinzel, which is kind of like a centrifuge, and that's a great bit. I want to justify it, but I don't. Yeah. I don't think I can fit it in the one space I have, and I'm going to live vicariously just thinking about your rotor. But no, it's. I think it's also like what I like about that is it's a modernist approach to food, but it's still focused on kind of retaining a level of form, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think I'm not ashamed to say, like, you know, when I was, you know, certainly when I first started the Wilderness. At that point, I was still very heavily like, I wanted to always try and like find new techniques. I guess that's it. It's when you hit to a technique becomes, I want to do technique over flavor, or technique over kind of retaining the integrity of this product, you know. And that comes from, as you say, the little voice going, it might not taste great, but it's very clever.
Yeah.
And I think experience and time teaches you like that modernist techniques should really just be about a better way to do old things, or kind of a way to extract a flavor that you know is there because it exists in nature, but for whatever reason, kind of, you know, heat and sort of other treatments won't get there. Yeah, really, really cool, man.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's like, there's definitely stuff that I look back on that I did 10 or 15 years ago, and I'm like, there's no way I would do that now. But I think that's probably likely for most chefs, no matter what sort of food they're doing. And I also think, like, you could kind of kick yourself over this stuff and be like, oh, you know, I wouldn't approach stuff like that, and I definitely wouldn't. But equally, it's part of your learning process, right? Is to go through, like, as a young, ambitious chef, like, I don't think we should necessarily be criticizing people for trying to push the edge of what they can do and stuff, because you either learn from it or you don't. But so.
You know, I kind of think like evolution is the most important thing, and I think you know, there's all the tropes. Everyone goes through it. You know, everyone goes through it, and even food trends. You know, like restaurants ebb and flow, man. You know, you and me, when I think we were both at, you know, different stages, of formative stages, and sort of like, let's be honest, like if it wasn't Nordic, it wasn't happening.
Sure, yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's, you know, that's still present in kind of, you know, modern ambient cooking, but you then kind of can see, you can see much more traditional cooking kind of almost coming back as a rebellion. Like, it's what I think is the fun thing about cooking professionally, that like the variables are pretty much infinite, which can either be really good or the whole reason why it can be really hard. But yeah, I think if it's not evolving, if you're not changing what you do, you're not reassessing it, and actually if you're not comparing it in a kind of quite detached way to what you did before, I think that's kind of all you can do.
Yeah, I agree. And like you say, there's these flows of things, and like and what's in focus at a particular time, you know. So we're still, I would say, in the period of time where, like, if you're not making your own koji, then what are you even doing? And you know, it's like, and don't get me wrong, like I make koji, I use koji on
We
the
do
menu,
as well,
you know,
like Josh
fermentation,
just like, we make koji.
Yeah. But like, and it's definitely not like, the thing is, it's a great method of achieving flavor, right? But it's one of those things that's in hyper focus at the moment, and it's equally, the other thing is, it's not a guarantee of flavor in the same way that the rotovap isn't, or putting through something, you know, centrifuging things, or having a Paco jet or whatever is like, it's all this stuff is kind of tools, like just getting a koji fermentation chamber, or just getting liquid nitrogen or something, much so it'd be lovely if it did work that way, doesn't improve the food. It's then, do you find that smart thing to do with that thing? Do you find a way to generate something really delicious? And you know, again, I think you see it all across different types of restaurants and different styles of cooking and different stages of careers, that like, of course people want to try what the new thing is, and then what works from it sticks around, you know, like there's a reason people still use liquid nitrogen in kitchens. It's super practical for certain things, but it's become less of a novelty effect, you know, that it would have been, say, 10 years ago or something. And I think, you know, we'll see the same of that with fermentation and koji and foraging and stuff, same way we did with water baths now, right? Like, you wouldn't be like, hey guys, I cooked this in a water bath, you won't believe it. It's like, they're so normalized now because we sort of know what they're good for and what they're not good for, and you know.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I suppose you almost have, when I think things work best is when these things cease to become kind of shorthand for like innovation or resource, and they actually kind of, they become less standout. Like, I think that's dead true. Like, you know, for me, the things that 10 years ago I was like, oh my god, like, have you seen this, you know, this you know, have you seen this fluid gel? Oh, do you want to see this foam? Oh, I've made a meringue without eggs, like all this stuff. When it was almost sort of like having to stand out, and the exceptional thing about it was the technique, I'm not sure it was me, you know, cooking or thinking at my best. when those things just become techniques in your arsenal that sit below the surface with everything else, and can sit in the same sentence as I've brined this, and it's this way. When they become normalized, I think that's when they can actually shine really weirdly.
Yeah, I agree. I think like if you could, like a pretty good test, I think, is like, could you put that plate of food or that dish down in front of someone and tell them nothing about how it's made, and would it still be like as strong? Would it still be like, if you, and again, don't get me wrong, like all of these things we've discussed, the things that I use and currently use and stuff, but it's just, it's a good mental exercise to be like, could I tell people basically nothing about this and they would still love it? It would still be delicious,
That's the one. Is the flavor and enjoyment self-evident?
Yeah.
If you have to explain to someone why they should be enjoying it, in any other area of life, it's an absolute warning sign.
Yeah.
Eddie, just before we started recording, Alex was congratulating you on an award. I just wanted to talk to you about awards and accolades, because obviously your concept is so different. Is it something are there things that you still aspire to achieve? We were talking about certain clubs that people want to be in. Is it something that you still think about, or not at all?
It's not something that I focus on particularly, because I think, because the way that I work is different, like it might be that it's just like, it's been a big advantage actually in a lot of ways to be kind of under the radar for a number of years, which it is a bit less so now, but still I would say compared to restaurants perhaps doing similar food, it's a bit under the radar. So I don't know if it would get even like inspected by some of the restaurant awards and things like that. Like they might just be like, well, this isn't what we think of as a restaurant. So so it would be kind of nuts for me to focus too much on any of that stuff. But that said, it's still nice when you get any kind of positive feedback, especially if you're having like on Monday, I was having a really tough day in the kitchen this week on Monday. Just like I had a lot of prep to do that was like a number of the jobs that are not my favorite jobs, that are just, a bit of a slog, like cooking can be at times. And I was working on a new dish, and it was just like, I had an idea that I was sure was going to work for it. And it not only didn't work, but it was like terrible. So I was just having one of those moments where you're like, I've got all this work to do. I've just wasted an hour working on this thing speculatively, which I'm now not going to be able to use. And I just feel like, I'm rubbish at my job. I'm just having like a terrible day. And then I got someone pinged me through a message with this guy, Craig, an actor who'd come the other week, and he was talking on a podcast about the meal and just saying a bunch of really lovely complimentary stuff. And it probably my ego shouldn't be this fragile, but it really helped turn a crappy day around, because you're like, oh cool, it's just nice to hear someone had such an enjoyable time, and the food had an impact on them and stuff. And so in that sense, the feedback or award stuff or anything like that is important, just in that it's sometimes I think you just need that little boost if you're having a difficult day or a difficult month, but again, probably best not to rely on it.
Alex, do you think something like Michelin, to progress itself, needs to understand that concepts within dining are changing?
Great question. Yeah, sure, why not? I think increasingly, as you see more diversification of kind of how people do restaurants and how people eat out as well, right? Because these guides are actually meant to be for the general public who eat at restaurants, not for the chefs who obsess over them, right? They're meant to be a functional guide. I think so, but I genuinely don't know how they move past it. The more restaurants that open, the more diverse they are, the harder they are to get in. Just practically speaking, I don't really know how they stay abreast or how they kind of stay relevant unless they are very much just locally focused. I guess, I guess maybe it's a tacit acceptance that there's no such thing as a perfect guide. Like, you know, like I know, for example, you know, the NRA is like, I know that there's been some spitback this year from some places who are kind of upset they weren't in it. But, you know, I think you have to take it with a pinch of salt. It's important to celebrate, and it's important to bring restaurants together. And I think actually those are the two things that for me matter about the guides. You know, I don't really think the veracity of them is anything you can objectively quantify. You know, there's restaurants that have got 1 star that I think categorically should be 2 or 3, and there's restaurants that have got 3 stars where I'd rather go to the pub around the corner. But that's the beauty of food. Like, it's so subjective. You know, some people would adore something as intimate and as kind of, you know, connected to the chef as eating, you know, with Eddie with 8 covers. And there's some folks who absolutely want a tablecloth and 6 people fanning them. And that's cool, man. Like, food's just, it's a thing. It's a thing we do. I think it'd be nice to see sort of just, you know, just more kind of, I suppose, spotlight on kind of other things that's been done in food. And I think, you know, one of the things that I struggle with is, you know, in many ways, I've always wanted to move the restaurant to somewhere more prominent. But I know that a lot of the enjoyment for our guests is the fact that we are underground. We're a bit, you know, we're a bit kind of hard to find. It's a little bit, if you know, you know. I guess maybe that's part of the sell as well, you know, for Eddie. Like, it's okay sometimes to be like a bit of a hidden gem. People love that shit.
Yeah.
I think it'd be great for, you know, for perhaps some more mainstream guys to sort of just nice be like, look, we don't know how to categorize this, but here's a cool thing you might be interested in, you know? But I don't really know how they integrate it. Like, you know, all jokes aside, like, I just think it must be mental hard for like inspectors. You know, like, I don't buy into this kind of, oh, what an amazing job, you get to go and eat all these nice places, sort of like palate fatigue much. You're always traveling around, you're going to restaurants, you're having to come with increasingly difficult to imagine fake names. Like, the pressure must be inevitable. So, you know, I don't know. You know, my thoughts over the last couple of years have kind of crystallized on it. And I just think, like, it's so important to celebrate restaurants and celebrate chefs and to give people cause to bring together. And I think that's kind of the important message, right? Like, I don't mind whether I'm on a list or not. Like, I don't intrinsically think that shouldn't be the anchor of the value of what any of us do.
Yeah.
And I think increasingly with, you know, microblogging and the internet and all these things that are part of the modern commercial landscape, do you know what? Like, you don't need them to be commercially viable or successful. So their purpose is joy and celebration, you know, and actually the excitement that so many feel ahead of these awards. That's cool. It's a hard job. We should celebrate that. And I think they should be about joy, not about pressure, perhaps, as we go forward.
I think, I agree with what you're saying there as well. And I think also just from, I feel like perhaps we're starting to see a little change on this inside the industry as well, in that, like, my feeling is that more and more now than, say, when I started out, chefs and other restaurants are like shouting out good stuff or trying to support each other and stuff like this, and say, like, and turn people on to other interesting stuff in a way that I'm not saying didn't exist before, but I think it is like, I think it feels like that's growing a bit more. And, like, I'm sure COVID's had stuff to do with this as well. Like, everyone has been united across the industry in having a horrible time. Like, you know, and it's like, and as you come out of that, how could you want, like, anything other than for the other people that do work in and are passionate about the same thing that you are to be, like, doing well? And, you know, it's like that supportiveness, I feel a lot.
It's the ebb and flow thing as well, you know. If someone else has their time to shine, I just kind of think, yeah, good, because these things, you know, they come and go. You know, if they have their time to shine this year, maybe it'll be yours in a year, 2 years, 3 years, or maybe it'll never come. But, like, yeah, you know, I sort of feel like for me, it's hard to answer whether they should diversify their lists, because I think I understand them differently from perhaps how some folks might anyway. Like, I don't look to them to be like the oracle. I don't expect them to try and make an impossible judgment on a subjective thing. I just think they're there to kind of just keep people excited about restaurants and to kind of give chefs a reason to come together. And I think they do that pretty well. you know, and Michelin have done loads of editorial stuff, which I think was interesting. You know, I've seen much more editorial stuff from them than recently, but all of that stuff, man, it's the icing on the cake. We are all still roughly in business and have our health.
Yeah.
And, you know, in this current landscape, man, that's the core, that's the bricks and mortar of it. You know, the rest of it is just fun shit, right?
Well, Eddie said he's booked up till 2022 anyway, so he's all right, doesn't need the list.
Yeah, I mean that is a nice, again, I guess that it's a lovely position to be in. I mean, a lot of that is like, look, you know, I'm only 8 covers, I'm open 4 nights of the week, you know, so it's not shed loads of seats to fill, and of course a chunk of this is still, like, I'm still until mid-September, I think, basically cooking for people that had booked, that have been shifted from lockdown, mainly at least. But yeah, it's totally lovely to still, like, that essentially job security of knowing I'm full this far in the future. And that's just like, that's where I've released tickets up until, like, I think if I release them further, I could be full further, but it's nice to leave yourself some flexibility. And
yeah, of course.
It's a lovely position to be in, and hopefully as well, it shows, like, it's been a long road to get to that point and stuff, but you can totally, there isn't just one way of doing things. You know, you can be out on a limb doing your own thing and be a bit outside of the sort of normal workings of things, and still, like, you can make it work. Like, it can work really well.
Yeah. Pre-COVID, I know you were doing some interesting pop-ups in all over the world, really, weren't you? So is that something that you would want to go back to once travel is back to the norm? Because I think you did a takeover for us. Was it in Mexico?
Yes, I did. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So why do you do those sorts of things? Is it just like the learning again? Like, because he said, obviously, you get to a point where you need to go and find new stuff for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, so now I've been really lucky with this, and this is like, when you sort of say them back to back and stuff, it sounds like a much more luxurious lifestyle than I lead. But like, yeah, like
just one time I was in Greece.
Oh, yeah.
Due to my Caribbean residency.
The couple that had a big influence on me in the past couple of years was Mexico, and I did a charity dinner in Szechuan. And so the charity dinner in Szechuan was nuts. That was on a bear rescue sanctuary. So I'm out in, like, really rural Szechuan, China, like a bit of the world I can't think I would have ever visited if it wasn't for food. And the whole experience was fascinating. I got to, you know, try a lot of Szechuan food and get kind of immersed in that place for, you know, a short period of time, but a short, intensive period of time. And cooking in Mexico was immense. That was like, had a huge influence on me. I'd never been to Mexico before, didn't really know what to expect, and the food there just completely blew me away. Like, you know, like, I got there not knowing what to expect, and it was just like, I had a slightly curated experience, and I was in Mexico City and I was with food people, you know, so they were taking us to good places, but like, it was so good. And we just, like, we've got the very, very beginnings of it now, but still largely across the UK, you can't really get anything close to real Mexican food. You know, anything that you get is like a Tex-Mex version, and that is we're just beginning to get bits of, like, really good Mexican cooking. And obviously Cole's opened up in London, and, you know, and there are other places doing, like, you know, good tacos and stuff, but that first introduction to proper fresh masa and nixtamalization of corn, and like the cooking style had this very different approach to, you know, Western French sort of driven, like, cooking. It's like, you know, it's completely different. Flavor profiles are so different, and it's had like a massive effect on, you know, there's a number of dishes on the menu now where you might not immediately see that influence, but it is in there for me. And that was, it was awesome. I got to work with some really great chefs, and as a learning experience, it's just incredible. And I really hope travel does come back at some point, because yeah, those things have had a big influence on me, and especially working on my own normally, like just stuff again that gets you out and gets new input, new ideas coming in and stuff is like, yeah, it's great.
Well, I don't know about you, Alex, but I've really enjoyed that. That was so positive. We've had such a mix of guests, haven't we? But I just feel like, Eddie, you're just so like passionate and so positive about what you do. I really, really enjoyed that hour. It's been good fun.
Yeah, I have no surprises, mate. Like, I know you're out on a mission, and I like the way your brain works, dude. Like,
oh, cheers, man. It's mutual.
In 22, maybe 23 after this podcast, because this is a pretty big driver. I'm sure it's gonna, blast us through the roof. But I'd have to come up and I'd love to meet with you, man.
Yes, definitely. Do
some cool stuff. If you're not in Barbados or any of your exotic residences, cool. But no, man, like please keep doing it, keep sharing it, man. It's so interesting, in a time where we are a little bit more stuck in a much smaller world than before. It's I'm sure I'm not alone in it. I find it so inspirational seeing what everyone else is up to, how everyone else is coming back. And I'll still keep looking through my little copies of your kind of cookbooks, man, when I'm kind of trying to get some inspo for kind of new ideas. So thank you, thanks for coming on.
Such a fanboy today, Alex.
It's called gratitude, Cara.
Thank you both. It's been brilliant. Thanks, Eddie. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's lovely to chat to you both.
Have a good one. Cheers.
Thank you.